Welcome to Sales Comp Decoded, the show where we explore the stories behind how companies pay people to sell. I am Abimbola. In our last episode, we look at the payout curve and how threshold, accelerators, and caps can either keep sellers moving or quietly encouraging them to stop at targets. Today, we are looking at what happens when a promising compensation idea has to become a real plan. Our topic is From Good Idea to Signed Plan. Picture a vice president of sales leaving the annual planning meeting with a clear direction. This year, the company will focus more heavily on enterprise customers. It will encourage longer agreements and reward sellers who build strategic relationships rather than simply closing the fastest available deal. The intentions are sensible and everyone in the room agrees. 3 months later, the final plan reaches the sales team. The enterprise focus appears as an additional reward, but the qualifying level is so high that hardly any opportunity can reach it. The multi-year strategy appears as a small commission increase, but the amount is too weak to influence a seller choosing between a simple annual agreement and a more difficult long-term contract. The relationship building ambition has disappeared because nobody found a reliable way to measure it. 3 months of meetings, spreadsheet modeling, scenario testing, senior stakeholder edits have produced a plan that communicates almost none of the original intention. The strategy did not fail in the leadership meeting. It was lost gradually, quietly, as the idea moved from strategy into the final plan. Sales compensation design often appears to be a technical exercise. There are measures, quotas, threshold, commission rates, accelerators, and payout calculations. Once the mechanics are understood, the mathematics can be modeled, and modern technology can test some scenarios faster than before. But faster modeling does not solve the real design problem. The challenge is turning one kind of thinking into another. Strategy must become behavior. Behavior must become a measure, and the measure must become plan mechanics. The mechanic must become a clear language, and that language must become action in the field. Every handoff creates an opportunity for the original idea to change. A strategy to grow customer enterprise can become a measure based only on deal size. A desire for profitable growth can become a margin measure even when sellers have little overpricing or delivery costs. A request for greater collaboration can become shred credits without anyone deciding who remains accountable for closing the deal. Each adjustment may sound reasonable on its own, but when they are combined, the final plan may no longer express what leadership originally wanted. And that is why the process matters just as much as the mechanics. Before anyone opens a spreadsheet or writes a formula, the leadership team should agree on one sentence explaining what the plan is designed to produce. The sentence should not describe the commission calculation. It should describe the outcome the business wants and the behavior it wants to make more attractive. For example, this plan is designed to accelerate profitable enterprise growth by making multi-year, multi-product deals the most financially rewarded outcome for the roles that can genuinely influence them. That sentence gives the entire design process a North Star. When someone proposes a measure, the group can ask whether it supports the sentence. When finance changes a rate, the team can test whether the intended behavior remains financially attractive. When human resources raises a fairness concern or legal adds an important condition, the final design can still be checked against the same purpose. Without that agreement, stakeholders may approve the same mechanics while imagining completely different outcomes. Sales may believe the plan exists to accelerate enterprise growth, while finance sees cost control as its primary purpose. Human resource may focus on market competitiveness, while revenue operation focuses on data quality and pipeline discipline. Every perspective matters, but the group still needs to agree on what the plan is mainly there to achieve. Otherwise, the design may try to serve every priority equally and end up making none of them clear. Once the purpose is clear, leadership needs to describe what sellers should do differently during an ordinary working day. Grow enterprise revenue is an outcome. Spending more time developing larger and complex accounts describes the behavior you want. Improve profitability is an outcome. Protecting price during negotiation and pursuing customers with stronger, longer time value describes the behavior. Encourage collaboration is still only an intention, but involving a technical specialist earlier in a suitable opportunity describes something the seller can actually do. This distinction matters because sellers do not only act directly on strategy statements, they decide which customer to call, which opportunity to prioritize, which products to recommend, and whether to involve another person in the deal. The plan should support those real decisions. A useful discipline is to write down a small number of behavioral intentions before the financial design begins and keep them visible throughout every meeting. That prevents the strategy from disappearing when the conversation turns to rates, bonus, and formulas. The next challenge is turning the desired behavior into something the company can measure. This is often the first major failure point because no measure represents human behavior perfectly. A company may measure new customer focus through new annual recurring revenue, but that naturally rewards deal size more than the number or quality of new relationship. Enterprise growth could be measured through customer size or contract value, although earlier option may exclude opportunities that are strategically important for other reasons. And multi-year selling can be recognized through contract length, but some customers may have a valid reason to begin with a shorter agreement. Profitability can also be measured, and that has become more important as companies pay greater attention to the quality of their revenue. However, a margin measure is only fair when the seller has meaningful influence over pricing, discounting, and deal structure. So every measure is an approximation. The aim is to choose one that sits close to the desired behavior and can be calculated reliably and is easy for both the seller and finance to verify. It should also avoid creating a larger unintended problem. Before adding the measure to the plan, explain it in plain language. What behavior does the measure encourage, and why does that behavior matters? If the answer requires a long or complicated explanation, the measure is not ready. Once the measure and mechanics begin to take shape, the company must test how the plan behaves financially. A plan that appears affordable at target may produce a very different result when several sellers exceed target at the same time. Leadership, therefore, needs to examine at least three broad scenarios. What happens when performance is weaker than expected? What happens when the team delivers roughly the planned results? And what happens when a meaningful number of sellers reach 120 or 130% of targets? At each level, the company should understand the total variable cost, the range of individual earnings, and the value the business receives in return. The purpose is not to make the plan cheap. A successful sales plan should generate larger payouts when the company receives greater value. The purpose of modeling is to ensure that leadership remains comfortable when the plan performs extremely well. Artificial intelligence and modern compensation tools can make this testing now faster. They can compare more scenarios, identify usual payout pattern, and reveal where several mechanics combine to create an unexpected result. But easier modeling can create a false sense of security because a sophisticated system can calculate the wrong plan perfectly. Technology can show what the plan will pay, but leadership still has to decide whether it rewards the right outcome. Modeling also creates a temptation to over-engineer the plan. The team begins by solving the legitimate concerns and then add a multiplier, a special rule, a product adjustment, and an exception for one particular market. Each addition may improve the mathematical precision of the model, and together they can make the plan impossible for an ordinary seller to follow. A salesperson does not need to reproduce every calculation mentally, but they should understand how a commercial decision is likely to affect their earnings. If they cannot see that connection, the motivational value of the plan weakens. They may ignore smaller measures, follow only the largest one, or build their own simplified interpretation of the rules. A technically accurate plan can therefore fail as a management tool because the message is too difficult to use. Simplicity does not mean removing every necessary condition. It just means refusing to add complexity unless that complexity protects something important enough to justify the burden. The design should be as simple as the business allows, rather than as complicated as the spreadsheet permits. The next stage is stakeholder alignment, and this is another point where strong plans begins to weaken. Sales, finance, human resource, legal, and the operational teams examine the plan through different lenses. Sales asks whether the plan supports a commercial strategy and gives capable seller a fair chance to succeed. Finance looks at affordability, data reliability, and whether each payment can be explained. While human resources consider role fits, fairness, consistencies, legal focuses on whether the rules are clear and enforceable. But the common mistake is to send the plan to each function separately. Sales will review one version, finance changes it, human resources review the revised version and adds another condition, legal receives a later version and makes further edits. By the end, everyone has commented on the plan, but they may not have agreed on the same plan. Finance may have changed something sales believed was final, while human resources may have reviewed mechanics that no longer exist. A stronger approach is to bring the key stakeholders into the same final review. The meeting may be harder to arrange and the discussion may take longer, But disagreement becomes visible while everyone is still present. The goal is not simply to collect approval. The goal is this: the group must agree on what the plan is designed to achieve, how the mechanics supports that purpose, and which trade offs the business has consciously accepted. At the end of one design meeting, I asked everyone in the room to write down one sentence describing what they believed the plan was designed to achieve. There were 8 people in the room. They produced 8 different answers. The answers were not completely opposed, but their emphases were meaningfully different. The sales leader focused on enterprise growth, finance focused on compensation costs, human resource focused on fairness and retention, revenue operation focused on pipeline quality and reliable data. Every perspective was valid. Each one appeared somewhere in the plan, but the group had never agreed on which outcome was primary. Without that agreement, leaders will communicate the plan differently and managers will emphasize a different priorities. Once the decisions are final, the plan document must carry the same meaning to people who were not part of the design process. The designer remembered the meetings, compromises, and reason behind every rule. The seller sees only the words on the page. Any gap will be filled with an assumption, and every unclear definition creates an opportunity for different interpretation. The document should therefore be tested using realistic situation. Give the sample plan to a salesperson, a finance manager, or human resource. Then ask each person the same question. For example, a customer agrees to a deal before the end of the quarter, but the final signature arrives 3 days later. Which quarter receives the credits? If all 3 people reach the same answer, the rule is probably clear. But if they interpret the situation differently, the document still contains ambiguity. The best time to discover that ambiguity is before anyone's earnings depends on it. When a clause needs a long verbal explanation every time someone asks about it, the document is not finished yet. A signed plan is not yet a launch plan. The plan becomes real when managers explain it to their teams. This stage is often compressed into an email and one company-wide presentation, after which managers are expected to handle individual conversations. But those conversations rarely stay at the level of the presentation. Sellers asked about their territories, comparisons with last year, specific deals, exceptions, and situations that were not covered on the slides. When managers have not been prepared, they may give an uncertain answer or refer every question to finance, human resources, or the compensation team. Either response weakens confidence. And manager enablement should happen before seller receive the plan. Manager needs time to ask difficult questions privately, walk through realistic payout examples, and understand where to send issues they cannot resolve. They also need clear answers to the questions sellers are most likely to ask. Managers do not need to become compensation specialists, but they should be able to explain why the plan changed, what it is designed to produce, and how performance connects to earnings. Managers are not just explaining the rules, they are defending the logic. Before approving the plan, ask every stakeholder to complete the same sentence. For instance, this plan is designed to produce, let them answer. Then compare the results. If stakeholders describe different priorities, the plan is not ready. If the answer requires a long explanation, the purpose is not yet clear enough. And if managers cannot repeat the sentence and language their teams will understand, the plan is not ready to launch. A strong design process begins with the business intention. Translate it into behavior. Choose a measure that can carry that behavior and test the financial outcome. The stakeholders then align on the same final design. The decisions are written clearly and managers are prepared before the plan reaches sellers. Each stage does work that the others cannot replace. Financial modeling cannot repair an unclear strategy. A well-written document cannot fix conflicting measures, and a polished launch presentation cannot create managers' confidence when managers have not been properly prepared. Skipping one stage really saves time. It simply moves the problem further down the process, where it becomes even more visible, more expensive, and harder to correct. The measure becomes a formula, and the formula passes through several people before reaching the sales team. A strong process protects the original purpose at every stage. So, before the next design cycle begins, write the sentence first, keep it visible throughout the process, and do not launch until stakeholders and managers can explain it in the same way. This closes our series on plan design. In the next episode, we move into role-based compensation, beginning with the enterprise account executive, where long sales cycles, large deal, complex buying groups, and share contribution create some of the most difficult design decisions in sales compensation. This is Sales Comp Decoded, and I am Abimbola. If this episode was useful, share it with someone responsible for turning sales strategy into an actual compensation plan. The process matters because even a strong idea can disappear before the plan reaches the people expected to follow it.